The Star Wars film franchise has seen better days, I think it's fair to say. Of course, you could also say the same thing of most big franchises these days, whether they're affected by wokeness or just general creative bankruptcy from being milked for too long by Hollywood. And it's worth discussing this in the context of 2019's Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, which I think really crystallizes this in many respects. And how, in my opinion, it really doesn't leave much of an impact, which I think is tragic because Star Wars has been a massive iconic pop culture phenomenon, and now it feels like, well, imagine a famous rock band with their best days long behind them, and they're still touring, they're still playing their biggest hits, but their new material isn't great, and their performances aren't quite what they used to be, so they almost feel like a tribute band to themselves. I mean, technically there's nothing really wrong here, but there's nothing groundbreaking, and more to the point, it all just feels tired. The fact that now in our modern cinema, filmmakers, visual digital artists, they can produce these incredible CGI environments, they can bring to life dream worlds, amazing vistas, they can create very realistic environments, they can build these whole universes, and we have all the special effects, these incredible fight scenes. We can bring things in our imagination to life, and yet things have never felt more bland. The script should ultimately be the thing that matters the most, and yet, with all of the hundreds of millions of dollars at their disposal, all of the gargantuan resources that Disney has, and yet all they can produce is the same old cookie-cutter action films that emphasize spectacle over story. The plots of this modern trilogy feel like they were written by committee or by an algorithm that basically sifted through all of the previous films in the franchise, found recurring plot points, themes, and action set pieces, and just copied and pasted bits of them, stitching together a generic sci-fi action movie, but with a Star Wars veneer, a facsimile, a simulacra, with some minor modifications, something that kind of looks and sounds like a Star Wars movie, but lacks all of the originality, heart, and sentiment that made the originals so classic and memorable. Because ultimately, when art becomes concerned with first making money rather than being profound, thought-provoking, or culturally meaningful and relevant, it ultimately becomes frivolous. Studios are so risk-averse these days that they focus on big-budget franchise films rather than building something new, partly because there's money in the nostalgia factor. But this plan will ultimately backfire in the long run because franchise fatigue nowadays is closely related to unoriginality. In short, audiences don't want to pay to see the same old, same old. Certainly on television, The Mandalorian has shown recently that there's still potential for flashes of the Star Wars saga that fans want to see, but the new Book of Boba Fett series has failed to really ignite much fan interest. In this video, I specifically want to focus on Star Wars on the big screen. Does it still have a future there? And can the franchise return to its former glory? That's all coming up right after this. Before we go very much further, it's time now for a word from our partner for this video, NordVPN, a virtual private network that will keep you secure and safe online. Your activity and personal information on the internet these days is becoming increasingly more visible to others, and for that reason, you need to take steps to protect your data and privacy. NordVPN provides you with next-generation security features that allows you to do just that. It provides advanced protection against cyber attacks, malware, and trackers, and lets you block intrusive ads so that you are in full control of your web browsing experience. In addition to that, you can protect all of your devices on a single subscription. Nord works on Mac, PC, Linux, iOS, Android, and even your Wi-Fi router. Some VPNs really slow down your connection, but not Nord. Whatever you're doing, whether it's watching videos, streaming music, doing video calls, or playing video games, Nord's 5,200 plus super fast servers and groundbreaking NordLynx protocol mean that there's no bandwidth limits to worry about, just a robust, secure, and really fast connection. And their no logs policy means that there's no record of your web browsing history for third parties to see. You can hide your IP address with just a few clicks and have peace of mind while online, and in addition, Nord offers dedicated technical and customer support with a knowledgeable and friendly staff. Use my link in the description box and download Nord today. And if you make use of the promo code ComputingForever, you'll get 1 month for free when buying the 2-year plan. Okay, so welcome back. I'll kick off by pointing out that Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, which was obviously the last big screen outing for the franchise, had been preceded by the truly awful Last Jedi, and so fan expectations were likely extremely low for Rise of Skywalker. When you're producing a truly original and groundbreaking work, you have to take risks. But once that film becomes successful and eventually turns into a franchise of ongoing films that has developed its own built-in audience, taking risks is no longer advisable because, well, that could alienate the core audience, an audience that begins to develop expectations of their own as to what the films should be like. So the policy becomes about trying to retain that audience, and so sequels often become derivative works. Now, of course, there are some wonderful sequels out there that sometimes outdo the original, but it's often rare. And the longer the franchise runs for, the more underwhelming the films become. This is especially true of modern Star Wars films, which seem to be stuck in the past, obsessed with the Star Wars lore, as the new trilogy of prequels and sequels often focus on events, plot points, characters from the original trilogy, unable to move on and develop their own new history. I don't think I've ever cared less about a group of characters in a movie trilogy. Poe Dameron, Finn, Rey, I never connected with them. Even after all of this time, I don't really feel like I know them. I don't know much about them. I don't care to. I don't really know what they stand for as people. The acting is fine, it's just the writing. I always felt that they were just reacting to things that were happening around them, running from one action scene and witty one-liner to the next. The cultural impact and creative significance of the first 3 Star Wars films was never going to be surpassed. The last few films have been nothing but derivative and safe, and so I expected nothing less from Rise of Skywalker. I personally didn't find the film to be awful or even that bad. I just found it to be boring and bland. People have also compared it to The Return of the Jedi. As a concluding chapter of this new trilogy of films, they could have done a lot worse. At least it wraps up the story arc of the character of Rey, a character who was shallow and forgettable and devoid of any relatable personality. But nevertheless, her mystery is at least resolved. Poe and Finn don't really get any meaningful closure, however. The bad guy gets beaten in the end, and everyone celebrates, but beyond that, no one really learns anything about themselves. Kylo Ren eventually stops being bad after Rey saves his life, and he has a vision of his father, Han Solo, encouraging him to help Rey defeat the Emperor. Yeah, Palpatine is back, and it turns out Rey is his granddaughter. This is the issue with the Star Wars franchise following the first 3 films. It keeps recycling the same basic plot points, themes, and character story arcs over and over. In that way, it's a lot like the Terminator franchise. The film is heavy on action but low on originality, and also there's not much in the line of humor. I'm not going to go into the whole plot here, as I don't really think there's much to talk about. I found this film to be an endurance. My interest was just about held. This is very much Rey's story, and being the Mary Sue that she is, she's unbelievably powerful. I mean, she's practically godlike. She's flying around the place, she can pull ships out of the sky, and she can even heal the critically injured. I don't think that Rey ever became a really engaging character that you could really connect with. She's the Mary Sue of Mary Sues. I mean, she must be the most powerful Jedi ever, and it just doesn't really feel earned. And so she never seemed all that relatable or heroic because she never had to really grow as a person and overcome her own weaknesses or failings because she doesn't really have any weaknesses or failings because she's a Mary Sue. I mean, I think her whole story arc seemed to be about purely becoming more powerful through the Force. We didn't really learn all that much about her as a person, and to me, that's what makes her very two-dimensional. Not that Poe, Finn, or Kylo Ren were any better. I didn't like that Palpatine was brought back because his story arc ended in The Return of the Jedi, and the fact that he's been resurrected for The Rise of Skywalker kind of undervalues his death and the significance of his death in The Return of the Jedi. To me, the Star Wars franchise feels like it's running on fumes or heated up leftovers. And so Palpatine's resurrection is symbolic of that, because he too is being reanimated out of creative bankruptcy on the part of the filmmakers. By essentially imbuing Rey with all of the power of the Force and Palpatine with all of the power of the Sith, it kind of feels like stolen valor to me. Instead of Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader being able to take credit for destroying Palpatine at the end of The Return of the Jedi, Rey is now essentially able to take the credit. It becomes her victory and not his, and she also takes credit for then going on and saving the entire universe. Rise of Skywalker isn't very ambitious, it's not original, and it's not very good. It doesn't take any risks, and it plays it very safe. But honestly, what were we expecting? Sure, the story could have been a bit better, it could have been a bit stronger, it felt like a lazy rehash of previous ideas, but let's be honest, it is the 11th Star Wars film. I've said it for a long time, that Star Wars is still coasting on the memory of the original 3 films. They were groundbreaking for the time, but since then, the prequels and the latest films have been like facsimiles of lower quality. The real problem is the creative drought of Hollywood. It keeps going back to the same old wells over and over, looking to appeal to audience nostalgia by resurrecting old franchises that should have ended years ago. Ultimately, the box office numbers don't lie. This Wikipedia article breaks down the highest grossing films of 2019. Avengers Endgame is top of the list. It had a budget of something like over $350 million. And it managed to make $2.7 billion worldwide, which is roughly 7 times what it cost to make the film. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is down in 7th place. Imagine that. A Star Wars film that should really be competing for the top spot, in my opinion, given how iconic and legendary that franchise is. And here it is in 7th place, taking in over $1 billion worldwide, but from a $275 million budget. Also, the films that finished ahead of it that year were Joker, Captain Marvel, Spider-Man Far From Home, Frozen 2, and The Lion King, with Avengers Endgame taking the top spot. It may not be popular for me to say this to many Star Wars fans out there, but I personally feel that the story of Star Wars is long over. Just like with Star Trek and Terminator, it's time for new stories, new franchises, entirely new characters and universes to be created. Let's move forward instead of retreading old cinematic ground. Star Wars is quite formulaic. Fans expect to see certain motifs, themes, visuals, musical cues, etc. And if a Star Wars film deviated too much from the formula that makes a Star Wars film, many hardcore fans would likely complain that it was too radically different. So I'm not sure where Star Wars goes from here, but I personally think that things are looking a bit tired at this point. The originals will always be classics in my opinion, and I don't think that their impact will ever be equaled. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of The Rise of Skywalker? And I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.